very respected by conservative Catholics, a leader who unified the Catholic Church at a time when it was supposedly threatened by modernism and certainly threatened by the war and torn apart into national factions. A leader who unified the church, who kept the church conservative, who fought the communists in the post-war period, and who was a holy figure, seemed to be a very holy figure. So it's a theological and spiritual movement without regard to the Holocaust. Jewish leaders have asked that this canonization process be suspended until the Vatican archives have been opened, so that hopefully all of the diplomatic papers of Pius XII can be examined by historians to make a better evaluation of what actually went on, but it's not at all clear how that process will go.
As anticipated, there are a lot of questions. We'll take 2 more, and then they can continue over light refreshments in the atrium. So.
What do current Catholic theologians say when they consider what occurred in terms of the religious justification, which I fail to see? I can understand practical reasons, but no spiritual reasons that reverberate well within my thinking about the conduct of the popes, both of them, during this time. Have they reconsidered the events and what steps were available to them, and do they then say, yes, indeed, their absence of more direct intervention is understandable, as you helped, for me at least, to begin to understand the thinking process that was going on. And then finally, if they've decided that, to take up the excellent question that was raised before, why has not the church come out against the current wave of anti-Semitism in Europe? Because didn't they learn from lesson 1, why do we have to experience it again in lesson 2, what's going on now?
I'm not sure I can answer the second part of your question. There may be some here in the audience who can answer that second part better than I, and probably the first part as well, but I will tell you that with regard to Catholic scholarship and the Holocaust, there is a wide range of opinion and scholarly product. There are many Catholic scholars who have looked at the record of Pius XII and said, this was not adequate. This was not acceptable. One of the first was Father John Morley, who wrote a wonderful book about Vatican diplomacy, looking into every country, as I mentioned, about Vatican intervention and diplomatic behind-the-scenes efforts. And Father John Morley of Seton Hall University in New Jersey wrote that, this was it was quite new. He wrote, this was not adequate. The Vatican did not do enough. Father John Polikowski, we've spoken about his work. He is quoted in many articles in the media, in the New York Times, in the Wall Street Journal, in local papers, in Washington Post, big papers, Catholic papers, Jewish papers, in which he has said all the right things that we believe that were Vatican failures. Trying to understand, not maybe understand isn't the right word, trying to explain perhaps, I don't know what the right word is, at least trying to explain the pressure, but nevertheless saying the church made enormous mistakes. My colleague Michael Fayer, we are very good friends, he's written about post-war Catholic, immediate post-war activities of Pius XII and found them to be wanting. And there are many, many other scholars, James Carroll, John Cornwell, there are many Catholics who have written very well and researched very well. On the other hand, And I cannot understand why. There is a very strong conservative Catholic movement to beatify, canonize Pius XII, to issue statements declaring that he was responsible for the rescue of hundreds of thousands of Jews. The figure sometimes usually given is 800,000, that Pius XII saved 800,000. This is a claim that can be traced back, interestingly enough, and I may be taking too long to explain it, but taking too much time to answer your question, but this figure of 800,000 that Pius XII allegedly saved comes from the work of an Israeli diplomat scholar, interestingly enough, in the 1960s, Pinchas Lapid, who wrote that there were, the logic is something like this. There were 10 million Jews in Europe before the war. There were 6 million Jews in Europe who were killed. There were 1 million Jews in Europe who escaped at a certain point. That left so many, do the math, I've lost track, and who then goes on to say, some of those were rescued, everyone had to have a rescuer to survive. Some of those were rescued by Protestants, but the rest of them were rescued by Catholics. That's 800,000, and that's the figure that Pius XII is supposed to have saved. Now, I've spent the entire evening telling you that, in my opinion, yes, Jews were rescued by Catholic men and women of the church, but it was not Pius XII's rescue mission. But the claim, 800,000, has stuck, and you'll find it online if you go online, and you'll see these claims. There are foundations that fund research. There are foundations that present documents, maintaining that these documents are somehow new. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Putting the documents in a different context, misinterpreting the documents. For example, Pius XII gave extensive aid to Jews who wanted to leave Europe to emigrate before the Second World War. I didn't even mention that, but there's very clear that the Jews who Pius XII helped to get out of Europe were Catholic converts, not Jewish, not observant Jews, or not Jews by culture as well as religion. So there is a tremendous vested interest in disinformation, which in my mind is very tragic.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I don't call any discussion of Holocaust as enjoyable. I prefer to say that it was very informative. We all know and heard stories of children who were placed in monasteries and nunneries who were forced to convert. Indeed, I believe there is I believe he's a Jewish-born cardinal in the church. Yeah. Do you have any idea of how many of these children were forced and how they could be, well, I could understand how they could be forced, but how many of them were converted under these situations?
It's an extremely difficult question to answer. It's very complex. There were many different variations, varieties, many different experiences. I've talked to a lot of people about that. I've read a lot of testimonies about that, and there are just many, many different situations. And obviously no one knows, because the really egregious mistreatment would have been private, and particularly with little ones who didn't know their own background. But the situations, I'll describe a few. In some cases, parents turned their children over to convents with the understanding that those children would convert. In some cases, there was parental agreement. In many cases, more cases, parents desperate turned their children over to convents with the understanding that they would not be required to convert. In some cases, children wanting to be like everyone else, lonely without their parents, wanted to convert and asked to convert. In many cases, those children who asked were welcomed by nuns who loved them and wanted to save their souls and allowed them to convert. some children, forced is a different kind of word, but encouraged, yes, yes. And no one knows the distinctions and the numbers. And there are awful stories, and there are stories about convents that wouldn't return children after the war, whose parents had not come back and whose relatives wanted to claim them. There are many, many cases of children who never knew that they were Jewish. And we have no statistics for that. The cardinal in Paris was Cardinal Lustiger. He is now deceased, but he was a convert, claimed and truly believed that he had converted through his own will. He was about 14. He converted despite his parents, who were very unhappy that he had converted. And he always claimed that his was a truly genuine conversion. And he devoted his life not only to being the Archbishop of Paris, but to encourage Catholic Jewish understanding. So there is all different kinds of there are all different kinds of stories. I'll just end with a story that I like very much. Professor Saul Friedlander, who is one of the most prestigious and respected Jewish historians of the Holocaust. He's on a par with Elie Wiesel, with Primo Levi, who of course was not a historian but a great writer and is deceased. But Saul Friedlander's, Raoul Hilberg, Saul Friedlander is the prestigious among the prestigious. He was placed by his parents in a convent when his parents in southern France were desperate to find a place for him. He was converted. His parents gave permission for him to be converted so that he would truly be safe. He was converted. He was too young to know what his parents were or what it meant or where they had gone, but after the war, they didn't come back. He was a Catholic boy. He had had his first communion and confirmation. He wanted to be a priest, and the nuns were encouraging it. One day, a Catholic priest came to the convent and said to the nuns, "What are you doing here? What have you done? What permission do you have? What rights do you have to do this kind of conversion?" And remember that conversion is not supposed to occur without parental, but it of course often did. So he took the boy out to lunch. This priest took the boy, who became Saul Friedlander, to lunch, and they sat and they talked, and the priest told Saul Friedlander about the Holocaust, and about Auschwitz, and about what had happened to his parents, and about why his parents hadn't come back. And then the nuns had not told him. No one had told him. He was isolated and sheltered in his school by nuns who loved him. And the priest told him the story, and the priest said, "Now you decide what you want to do with your life." Cardinal Lustiger chose to remain and be a Catholic Archbishop in Paris. Saul Friedlander chose to go back to his roots, to be Jewish, to remain and live his life as a Jew. He spent time in Israel and still does. He teaches in Israel, he teaches in Geneva, and he teaches in California. But it is a story, I guess those two stories, side by side, of different responses, and there are many varieties of responses within that range.
Thank you, Dr.
You know, you have so many people. Nice to meet you. My husband came out here in 28. It was fun. Here. Our daughter. My mother. How are the trips? I go with circle of friends. I don't go a lot because I'm busy working. We have so
Thank you. Same here.
Great to see you.
My name's Anne. I know you. Everybody knows you.
I think I would accept to see
Even I know her.
a stranger from a stranger.
Did you hear what I said? Even I know her.
Really well out there. Really well. But she knows you.
Interesting. I saw you.
Wasn't that good?
I saw you across the room.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. He's out there. We just got back for 2 weeks. And how's Richard?
Richard is fine. He's at home. I had completely forgotten those things. And I knew I had to do something. I was there having dinner and I said, so I rushed here and Richard, where are you going? I'll tell you later.
Yeah. No, but have you read it?
I have the book, the first one she wrote, and I brought it in because just as a curiosity. This one, I read this one, which is the first one. It's a good one. I was not read anything else, but this was really good. So I thought it was an excellent presentation.
See everybody come in. How do you know who's here? She gave us the message.
You want to go by the figure, right? You go
Oh,